Hello, we've come together today to talk about having had the privilege of working together on the Woolmark company's recent global campaign, Where Will Not Fossil Fuel. We all know each other very well, but for the benefit of AdNet Zero Summit, we're going to introduce ourselves and talk about what we did on the project. So I'm Adam Booth, I'm managing partner at Park Village, the integrated production studio that produced the spot, and we represent Studio Birthplace in the UK. Laura?
I'm Laura Armstrong. I'm the general manager of marketing and communications at the Woolmark company, and I led everything from the client side and wrote and drafted the brief.
I'm Fran. I'm the strategy partner at 20 something. So I'm sort of the first port of call agency side for interpreting the brief and working out what research we need to do to find out how to speak to people.
I'm Sil van der Woerd. I'm a creative director at Studio Birthplace and one of the two directors of the film Where Will Not Fossil Fuel, based in the Netherlands.
My name is Jorik, Dozy, and I'm the other co-director of this campaign and one of the co-founders of Studio Birthplace.
So we're going to let you have the pleasure of watching the film for a minute. So obviously this is a piece of work that we're very proud of, and the campaign is a brilliant illustration of one of AdNet Zero's action points. Action point 5, harnessing the power of advertising to drive consumer behavior change. The whole project was conceived when Woolmark saw a piece of work that came out of Park Village and Studio Birthplace for a Greenpeace campaign, which was very successful. And so Woolmark approached us to talk about an environmental and behavior change campaign that needed to get significant reach and influence consumer behavior. So the film is obviously a very big part of the campaign, but there was also digital out of home, 3D out of home that played in New York and London, and a digital out of home stills campaign. It was quite an interesting collaboration model, I think a little bit unusual in comparison to the way most agency models are set up, in that Woolmark spoke to Park Village and Studio Birthplace, the production studios, and then we brought in 20 something who looked after all the strategy and a lot of the creative for the campaign. And I think that model was just a really good example of how there's different ways of working in terms of how clients engage with agencies and production, and it just meant that the production studio was in the conversation from the very outset of the campaign. Laura, do you want to just explain a little bit about the need for this campaign and what you hoped it would achieve?
Sure, yeah. Basically, our industry, the fashion industry, is on the cusp of systemic change. NGOs and governments and consumers are demanding reform, and rightly so. So, new legislations are being tabled across the world. Most notably in Europe, they're leading the charge. They're very ambitious with their plans, and they want to reform fashion and textiles, which is fantastic because greenwashing has been a huge issue in the fashion industry for over 10 years now. And that's really skewed the narrative around sustainability. consumers and the industry themselves are actually confused as to what is right and what's wrong and what's a good choice or a bad choice. Uh, so we needed to, I guess, correct some misinformation, especially around wool. Um, the reality is that wool is, one of the oldest, most reliable natural commodities that we have, and it had its heyday back in the 20s, the 30s, the 40s. It was everywhere in fashion and even in sports. It was like the original performance fiber. But when synthetics came onto the market, it became very competitive. They did a brilliant job of branding themselves as, a better alternative, as being better performing, and even better for the environment. So ultimately, wool as a commodity got overlooked. And now, when wool is thought of, it's thought of as something very conservative, reliable, maybe something that your granny would wear, but certainly not future fit. And as a result, it's not considered at all. But it has a great story to tell. It's quite like a remarkable fiber, actually. If you know anything about it, its sustainability credentials are pretty much unmatched. It's renewable, biodegradable. Sheep properties have the ability to even regenerate the land that they're grown on. It's the most recycled fiber. It's the most represented fiber in charity shops because it lasts longer, holds value. You could go on and on. It's got such an amazing story to tell. So it's kind of a sin that it's been overlooked as such. So we needed a campaign, first of all, to put wool back on the map, that cleared up this misinformation around sustainability arguments and conversation, and ultimately helped us overcome this huge problem of indifference to fabric. So we needed something that really helped consumers appreciate the link between fabric choice and impact on the planet.
So, do you think in order to get this message across to the public, and the kind of comparison between wool and synthetics, that you needed to show them something that was really hard hitting in terms of the content?
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, we're only 1% of the global textile supply chain, so we're tiny, um, and we have budgets to match that 1%. So whatever we do needs to be economical, and it needs to land. Like we don't have the chance to try again. So it had to be pointed, it had to be bold. We also don't have time as an industry to dance around and to mess this up, because in 10 years' time, pretty much a quarter of the clothing textile market will be made from synthetic fibers. And our consumption of clothing is growing exponentially. So, this impact on landfill and the microplastic pollution on the oceans is frightening and irreversible. So we cannot afford to miss the mark. We have to get this information out there and clear it up. But this was a big change in tonality for us. Going this bold felt like a bit of a risk for sure. But luckily, the Park Village teams and the 20-something teams really embraced the brief and understood the challenge and understood our position, and I guess our anxiety around putting ourselves out there, and give us the reassurance that we had the authority to be so bold and to make a comment on this. And then, of course, bringing in the genius of Studio Birthplace and helping us tell something that's really quite shocking and frightening in such an elegant way that it was stayed reflective of our brand and true to our brand. And we're known for prestige and quality assurance, really, quite iconic and conservative. So that whatever way we told this bold story, it needed to be elegant and beautiful. And I think the guys all work together amazingly and to do something that we're so proud to put our names to.
And Fran, do you want to talk a little bit about the process of understanding of this behaviour change brief and the stages that we went through to get to that creative?
Yeah, absolutely. So when Laura and the team came to us with that statistic around sort of 73% of the entire clothing market being synthetic clothing in 10 years' time, one of the things that we really wanted to do at the very beginning was understand why people bought the fabric they did in order to then help persuade them to change their behavior. So we looked at a lot of the data that the Woolmark team had on perceptions of fabric, and a really interesting pattern emerged. The data showed that when asked, people knew that synthetic material was bad for the environment. They also knew that wool was natural and better for the environment, but we still saw that people were buying synthetic clothing in increasing numbers. So we had a few hypotheses and a few conclusions based on this that we then wanted to dig into further. The first one was that price is obviously a huge factor. So that was something that we were sort of considering, but we thought, the brief needs to start at a perception level first. Availability is obviously massive, so retailers and the work that needs to be done there. But the key hypothesis for us, in order to start this journey of changing the world's perception of fabric, was that people just aren't making the link in their head between the clothes that they buy, the fabric that those clothes are made of, and the impact that that fabric has on the planet. So one of the sort of things that we found out in research is when you ask somebody, what's in your wardrobe, people say, oh, I have a t-shirt, I have a jumper, I have a shirt. They're not saying, I have cotton, I have rayon, I have polyester, I have wool. And that was one of the things that we really needed to do from the very beginning. We needed to make that link really clear for people, that clothes equals fabric equals impact. The challenge that we found when we started talking to people was that people don't relate to clothing on an intellectual level like that, on a rational level. They're not thinking about impact. They're not thinking about life cycle. They're not thinking about origin. The way they think about clothes is actually much more about feel, about touch, look, and comfort. That's the way that we think about clothes. So we needed to speak that sort of visceral, physical language in our imagery in order to make that link for people. And that's where the oil came in. So research showed us that the statistic people found the most sort of shocking and the most striking was that 350 million barrels of oil are used per year in the production of synthetic fibres. So once we knew that that was really the clincher for them, we wanted to use that fact and bring it to life in an image that could both show sort of volume and scale of this problem, but also the sort of physical, sticky, suffocating image on people's skin. And by doing that, we sort of managed to bypass the intellectualization of environmental issues and cut straight to the things that people care about, i.e., how does this feel on your skin? And by extension, what that feels like for the planet. And that's the ultimate sort of metaphor of the work.
So you've talked quite a bit about the research, but was there any kind of defining factor in whether it be audience research or environmental research that was really the key to getting to that kind of in a nutshell messaging?
I think we had to work out what was the best way to frame this message to our audience in order to get millions of people to sort of listen and pay attention and understand and really change their behavior and change their perceptions. Because once we were able to do that, then we can start putting in that kind of environmental research, which we already had from the Woolmark team in droves. Really, the challenge here was, how do we package that in a way that is people will be most receptive to and will really change their behaviour.
Packaging it was very much Sil and Jorik's job. So Sil and Jorik obviously directed this spot and did a wonderful job of it. Explain a little bit about how we ended up with the pool imagery as a starting point for the commercial.
Well, when we figured out which facts were most striking and most hard-hitting with the audience, we really tried to find the one striking visual that would immediately land with the audience. And of course, this came down to visualizing big data, because we're talking about big data here, the amount of oil that the synthetic fashion industry uses to produce all the synthetic garments. So what we learned from previous big data visualization projects was that it's very important to have understanding of the scale, like how do we relate to a number. You need to have a setting that is understandable, that's relatable. So we landed on an Olympic-sized swimming pool, because we all can kind of wrap our heads around that. But we also needed a time scale that we could understand. So we learned that every 25 minutes, we use 2.5 million liters of oil, which is basically an Olympic-sized swimming pool, which also uses 2.5 million liters. And we thought that is a very striking, very clear visual to people to basically tell the problem in a single image. So that's how we kind of landed on that image.
Yeah, and then we kind of thought about what using Fran's research and what she discovered on the sensory experience of oil and having that on your skin, and really visualizing what people don't seem to understand, which is that they're literally wearing oil in a way when they're wearing synthetics. So what we started thinking of, what would be the visual? Imagine if your clothes transform into their raw materials, or imagine if you're actually wearing the raw materials of what your clothes are made of. That would create a whole new level of awareness within people around what they're wearing, and hopefully would lead to that behavior change. So to achieve this, we wanted the talent coming from within the pool being completely submerged in the oil and then struggle to kind of reach the side of it. And they emerge and transition into their wool garments. So we really get this sensation of being completely covered in the oil and trying to get out of the mess, so to speak. So making the film that very visual experience that in the end is a memorable experience that people want to share and want to show their friends.
So, being one of the producers, I know what a huge endeavour it was to put this on screen. So, in terms of getting that impactful imagery and creating the spot, what creative and production processes and hurdles did we come across to get this across in the film?
Many, but I think we wanted to first kind of start from a point of how does this film feel, and what do we really need to convey this message? And we started to play a lot around. We started to play around a lot with the tone, because as Laura mentioned, like Woolmark is an elegant brand. There's a beauty to it, and we wanted the film to have a shock value and an impact, but at the same time, it couldn't turn into a horror film. Like, it had to be something that's beautiful and not scary. So we wanted to kind of make it feel more mysterious and have an elegance to the imagery and also the whole tone and feel of the piece. So in order to achieve this, we figured out like we want to put it in a beautiful setting. So we had to find a location that really worked for this feeling, and we wanted to set the whole oil part of the film in a blue hour type of lighting. So right before sunrise, so it really got that soft, beautiful light, the beautiful shadow, so we could have that elegance in the visuals. And then we needed performance. We needed actors that we could work with that could be completely in the oil and still give us a performance that felt like they were in control and they wanted to get out of this mess rather than a panicked atmosphere and again, going towards that horror effect. And this also kind of to make it reflect on what we can do as the consumer, because in the end, we are the ones making the decisions. We can choose what we're wearing. So we wanted to also kind of reflect that in the performance of the actors, like they're choosing to change their situation. So in the end, we after much research, we ended up in South Africa, where we could both find the studio facilities we needed and the incredible special effects teams that could help us create the oil, as well as the beautiful nature locations, which we ended up filming in Mpumalanga, which is near the Kruger National Park. And that offered a lot of variety in nature locations that were very nearby each other. So it was easier to film. And that's where we shot all the nature scenes, as well as the plates that we ended up, in the end, putting the pool in through the use of visual effects.
And the big challenge, of course, was how do we create a pool filled with oil? So we didn't create an entire Olympic-sized swimming pool filled with oil. That would have been a bit too much. But we did create a small section. It was actually 6 by 6 meters and filled with 36,000 liters of fake oil. And it took quite a bit of trial and error to find the right formula for this material. So we ended up using a mix of water and cellulose and a food coloring. And because it had to be edible, it had to be safe for the skin of the cast, but it also had to be neutral to the eye so it wouldn't sting. And the material had to be safe as well. So in the pool, we had to create like safety measures to make sure that it wasn't too slippery and that the cast wouldn't slip on the side of the pool, for instance. So there was a lot to consider. And of course, mixing this oil took quite a bit of time, and we needed like big tanks to make sure that all the bubbles were removed from the surface and stuff. And then the next challenge really was, how do you light what is basically a big reflecting mirror of black goo? Because everything around it will be visible. So we had a good collaboration with the VFX team actually before we shot to figure out the best setup for the set and for the shoot. And we landed on the construction of a white dome around the pool itself. And we lit it a base to match the place that we shot earlier in Mpumalanga in South Africa, so that the light was matching and all the reflections in the water were kind of matching one-on-one with the place that we had already shot. And then the visual effects team, they took over and they extended the real pool with the digital version. And they created digital characters that matched the cast, so that we could actually add some ripples to the surface of the pool as well. And we also added some oil drip simulations, especially for like when the cast makes it to the side of the pool and transitions from the oil into the wool garments. So to help that transition, we created some additional extra oil drip effects. And then, of course, we did the other work, like extending environments with more clouds and with more atmosphere to bring the spot to life.
So I think a lot of the production aspects that were at the forefront of our mind as we were putting this together is to keep it sustainable. It's an ecological project, and essentially we had to try and do everything as ecologically sound as we could. Now, there's obviously elements of the creative, such as travel and building the pool, where there's going to be a carbon footprint. But I suppose we didn't want the ecological aspect of the spot to hamper the creative. The creative still has to be effective. So we tried numerous ways to kind of reduce our carbon footprint. So we did have to fly, but of course, this team being split globally in Australia, Indonesia, Netherlands, London, someone was going to have to fly somewhere to get the shoot done. And we ended up deciding, we talked about lots of different ways in which to shoot different parts of the film in different areas of the world. We spoke about shooting the studio in one country and the nature environment in another. But we came to the conclusion that actually to minimize the travel, the best thing to do was to shoot it all in one place, which is how we kind of ended up in South Africa. But also to minimize the number of flights. So I won't pretend that COVID and budget didn't have an impact on that as well, but it was certainly at the forefront of our mind when we were thinking about how we travel around the world and who has to travel around the world. So in actual fact, the number of flights that we had was really minimal. The client, all of Laura's team, were dialed in remotely on set. None of them traveled. The agency, to an extent as well, we had one member of the agency as opposed to the normal 5 or 6 members of agency, and they were remotely dialed in as well to minimize those flights. And then when we were on set, we did all sorts of other measures that you would expect of a green production, such as all the usual aspects of trying to keep it a plastic-free set and using water bottles that aren't plastic and water coolers and the like. We went as far as making sure that we were using real cutlery and crockery as opposed to kind of disposables. All the cabs that we were using, we made sure that they were green cabs and as from sustainable companies. The oil itself, obviously, we had to create a huge volume of this oil, but the mix of that oil was not only creatively what looks best in terms of viscosity, but also how do we get rid of it at the end of the day. So we actively decided not to use an oil-based substance because it's harder to get rid of. So everything within the oil that we created was non-toxic, fully dilutable, and can basically be washed off and washed away. There's zero impact to the environment and to the people within it. And things like the casting, we made sure that we were casting it within the country that we were shooting in, as opposed to flying cast from around the world. So we went to great lengths to work with numerous casting directors in South Africa to get the right people who are going to have the capacity to do what we needed, but also to make sure that we weren't traveling them unnecessarily. And things like the catering on the shoot, we made sure that it was a 75% vegan and vegetarian. We were very conscious that we didn't want a kind of heavy meat catering, and all down to things like which lights we were using. The DOP, fantastic DOP, Leonard, was making sure that we used as many LED panels as possible, as few polyboards as possible. So he did an incredible job of lighting this pool to replicate the environment that we shot the nature plates in, but he did it in such a way with silks and trying to minimize the use of disposables within his lighting. And obviously there was things like paperless production, and the food waste was taken to charities, and even to the extent that the VFX team were making sure that their render farms were carbon offset. So there's lots of measures that we go to that obviously add net zero and promote as the best kind of green solutions. And we thought that this was a good example of all those things coming together within Ad Net Zero and trying to adhere to Ad Green. And that's one of the things that I think Park Village, Studio Birthplace, and 20 something all kind of pride themselves on is not only trying to facilitate green production, but also starting from the point of creative with sustainability in mind. So there was obviously a lot of different creative ideas that we went through before we created this spot. But in actual fact, it was always at the forefront of our mind as to, if we're going to create something impactful, there's going to be a certain carbon footprint to that. But how do we minimize it from the point of creative? So not creating an entire Olympic-sized pool, making sure that when we were shooting in nature, we were leaving no trace, and minimizing the number of vehicles and the number of people on set, which doesn't always make life easy. You know, you could always do with a couple more hands to carry a few more boxes, but we even had, Elliot's very proud of himself. Elliot, the head of copy at 20 something, was, you know, carrying cases, and I don't think there was any person within the set that wasn't doing dual roles within the whole production. I think it's something that Park Village is particularly keen on promoting in terms of being one of Ad Net Zero's supporters. We collect the Green Levy and implement all of Ad Green's carbon calculation solutions, and focus on those four key areas of transport, spaces, materials, and disposable. So all of our energy is renewable, and our waste is disposed of in an appropriate way. And it feels very much to me like the whole relationship with Woolmark has kind of come full circle for us. We were digging through Park Village's archives not so long ago and found some incredible spots from the 1970s where we'd worked with Woolmark, and we showed those to Laura and her team, and it kind of felt like it was a relationship that had been going for a very long time, even if there was a bit of a break in between. And it very much marries up with Studio Birthplace's ethos on how to produce work and which clients to produce work for. So it felt like a really good culmination of everybody's talents in that space. Laura, the response to the ad has been incredible. I don't know if you just want to talk a little bit about that and what Woolmark's planning next.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we were floored with the response. I mean, we knew it was good. I think we were so excited to get this creative out the door. And it couldn't have been more timely, I guess, that the message and the energy crisis and where everybody's head is at in terms of their relationship with the fossil fuel industry right now. So a lot of things came together, I think, that really supported the momentum of the campaign. But we were targeting consumers, absolutely laser targeting them. But the response from our industry, the fashion industry and the wool industry specifically, has been so incredible, so reassuring. The Australian wool growers, 55,000 of them, they are pretty notoriously hard to impress. I don't know if you know any farmers, but they're very light on with their compliments. They were enamored by it. They were so thankful to everybody who worked on it, because they felt that finally, there was a piece of work out there that reflected their point of view and really represented them and give them an opportunity to defend themselves in this space. So they are so incredibly pleased with it. So much so that, we we've extended the media for the campaign. We've brought it into Germany. We're bringing it into Italy. We extended it across the US and the UK and France, actually. So it's just, it could not have gone any better for us. I think we're tracking on 66 million views of the campaign so far and counting. And it's really heartening actually to look at the comments on social media, because it's quite rare that you can provoke such a conversation with an ad. And it's just reams and reams of commentary from viewers, just first of all shocked at the facts, so complimentary of the creative and the entertainment value, and like openly disclosing that they are going to change their behavior as a result of seeing the ad, which is literally all we wanted to achieve and more. So we're just delighted. Next, I mean, we've started a pretty powerful conversation here, and we have really earned, I think, a lot of respect in the industry, and now we have this quite valuable position and credibility around us. So there's a big challenge now. Next, we have to take it from education to action, and how do we encourage consumers to actually make better choices, and link this sustainability conversation to commerce, without devaluing our credibility in the space. Our customers are retailers and brands and designers, so we need to take them on that journey and I guess help them cater for the consumers that have responded so positively to the campaign. So it's about connecting commerce into this without losing credibility, and that is certainly a challenge, but no doubt these guys here will be able to figure it out.
I think we're all extremely proud of this piece of work, and not least working for the Woolmark company and trying to do our bit to help change behaviours and point things in a more positive direction. So hopefully this has been of benefit to the AdNet Zero Summit, and everyone can learn something from our story. Thanks a lot for your time.